is Anna. I'm the founder and creator of Hepp, is a social incubator dedicated to early placemaking through opening circus and performing arts to all. I'm here today with Steve Kellett, Sustainability Manager at Argent Property Development, and this live session is dedicated to the topic of embracing change. The world is on its head, discussing the post-corona environment and anticipating the futures for businesses, industries, and people. And this session is to contribute this discussion from the perspective of real estate, urban spaces, and environment. People will need to look into the ways of how some design practices needs to be re-established or maybe establish the new ones for the future and to future-proof our assets and make our environment resilient to things like pandemic. Steve, thank you very much for joining us today. And I think we're going to just jump straight through the questions. Is that all right?
Sure.
Great.
Yeah, let's do it.
Perfect. So as a start, what do you think are some essential rules that need to be rethought to deliver better and more resilient buildings and spaces? And can we learn from the past, or is this a time for reinventing ourselves?
I mean, it's a really broad question, and this is something that is obviously global, so there's going to be a lot of changes made, but equally, cities have been around for thousands of years. They've been through floods, famines, fires, plagues before, and they're resilient. And the best places come through this. And the places that have been designed well come through it as well. And actually, the stuff that's required post-COVID or to make a better world, we've always known. And actually, the best cities have known this for thousands of years. It's just we've had a bit of a brain melt in the last 3 generations where we've been obsessed with cars and we've thrown all good principles of good design out of the window and actually made some awful decisions in terms of city planning. And, you know, it's just thinking about what is good design and sticking to that. So let's go back to making good places. And
what do you think are going to be the best principles of this good design? Can you think about a couple of rules or anything that was introduced really successfully?
I mean, we know what good places are. Those are the places we go on holiday. You don't go to Milton Keynes for a holiday. You don't go to these new towns where they're in boring grids where you've got housing in one place, you've got offices in another, you've got fun in another place. This kind of monoculture approach to planning aren't the places you go on holiday. They're not the places you necessarily aspire to live. They're places that you're either forced to live or forced to work. And actually places you go on holiday are these old towns in Europe where you've got a mix of housing, you've got a mix of offices, you've got a mix of retail. And, you know, what Mayor Hidalgo in Paris is trying to do is try to make the 15-minute city. This was actually pre-COVID and she announced it in February. And, you know, that is just sticking to good design of making sure you have all your amenities within a 15-minute radius, whether that's people you want to see, places where you want to work, places where you want to have fun. It's they've always been good principles of good design. And yeah, well, Jane Jacobs said this about 60 years ago in everything that she produced. We know what makes good places.
Right. Very interesting. So I think it's quite important to have a self-sufficient neighborhood in this sense, right? And think about how variety of different typologies and uses can serve the same very community and the same very neighborhood. Is that what you're saying? Is there anything else that you think is important to say, what would be your perfect imagined self-sufficient neighborhood? It has to have a variety of uses, and you mentioned housing and work environments, workspaces. Is there some other key aspects of it that you think are really crucial for people to have?
I don't think you could be too structured in it because every place needs something unique, and so you need a bit of serendipity and a bit of randomness to make a great place. So you can't be too structured in it, but what you do start with is thinking about people. You don't think about the buildings, you think about people first. What will actually drive people there? What will make people work there? What will make people live there? You start with that, and then you put in the place or the space in between the buildings, and then you finish with the buildings. You don't start with what a building looks like. So it's a long process, and obviously most places exist already, so you've got to work with the existing urban fabric. And you're seeing that happen quite quickly now in London, where they're making cycle lanes like overnight. This is something that normally you would think takes years or tens of years planning and getting all the consultation in place, but we're seeing places change overnight now. And that's a really good thing about crises. It can spur you into action a lot more quickly. So we're making wider pavements, we're taking away car parking spaces for people to have little parks or cycle lanes, and it's stuff that should be obvious. And if you asked a child to design a place, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't fill 40% of it with roads and car parking spaces, and it would fit.
And I agree with you as well in terms of the way how quick the change may be implemented as soon as we actually see the real value in it, and we can demonstrate the fact that we do need these pavements, we do need this different ways of getting around the place and cycling through and not using or kind of overstretching the public transport abilities. But there was definitely a reason for why the cities were designed in the way they are designed, and what I'm talking about is mainly commercial reasons, so driven by stakeholders, our clients, who always have seen value in a different type of measurement. So saleable areas, a person per square foot, trying to maximize the saleable area within the plot or within the building. And I think we are at this point right now where we need to think about the ways of how we can convince them that there is a different way of establishing value or calculating that value. What would be your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, the asset owners or developers or landlords, they sell places on pounds per square foot. So it's not actually how many people are in it. Us as developer, we develop most of our places to Cat A, so it's just shell and core. And all we do is sell glorified column spacing, to be honest. So we don't care whether there's 10 people in that floor space or 1,000. So weirdly, you inherently think it's the developers that are making these dense office spaces with one person for every 6 meters squared. And don't get me wrong, sometimes it is. But actually, it's the occupiers who are trying to rationalize their portfolios. I agree with this because it saves a lot of money, but say they had 10 offices to cram them all in one office, have these hot desk working environments with one person for every 5 or 6 meters squared, which kind of makes sense on paper, and it certainly saves money. So you can certainly see how people that have made those decisions have saved millions of pounds by rationalizing their portfolio. But if you actually looked at worker happiness or productivity, maybe that's gone down. But the difficulty is it's far easier to measure pounds on a spreadsheet or how much you're spending on your office space than it is to measure productivity. We were doing some research about linking the internal environment, so daylighting or CO2 levels, to productivity. Measuring the internal environment is the easy part. Measuring productivity is nigh on impossible. Do you email traffic? No. Do you measure phone calls? No. Do you measure profit? No, because there's so many other variables. If there was a good way of measuring productivity, then that would be a start. And then people might see that it's more productive to have more space or more varied space in an office space where different types of personalities can learn to thrive. Or if you can measure happiness better, and we do surveys where everyone says their happiness from 1 to 7 or how much of the office space. But really, I haven't seen much evidence of that really being utilised by people who make decisions about workspaces. And maybe that will change and more of a priority on that rather than how much you spend on rent.
Right. Well, coming then to the workspace agenda and thinking about the ways that a lot of businesses are bringing their workspaces to be coming back to the offices right now, probably next week or the week after, upcoming weeks. It's not really the norm anymore for the COVID environment and post-COVID environment. We will need to readapt our places and think about how people can work in the environment that is actually safe for them, including the possibility of still sharing the virus. How do you think we can adapt? What are going to be the different typologies? Can you comment on this?
Yeah, I think it's impossible for me to speak on how long we might be living in a social distancing world. And from my knowledge, that it can't really go on for much longer than a year or two, because you're either going to find a vaccine or everyone's going to contract it and then be some form of immune to it. Or it might just live forever, but hopefully not. So I don't think you can make too many radical changes in the next year or two. You just need to think about the long-term implications of this, of what people actually want to get from work. And I think people, maybe from having a bit more time at home or more time with their families, are realizing that they want to get something more meaningful. So that might not be working 5 days a week. It might be working 4 days or even 3 days. So, and you also might start to realize that you don't want to commute for an hour by car into work, or an hour and a half, and have that 2-3 hours taken up of your day where when you're away from friends and family. So there's a lot of different implications. And I think, as I was saying, with offices, rather than having one headquarters with everyone commuting from a 100-mile radius into one space, you might have lots of satellite offices where there might be smaller office environments on your local high street, and they might be co-working spaces, but your company pays for that. That might be one area which I can see people wanting to still have that connection with people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now everyone's starting to appreciate well, on one level, you're appreciating that you can get stuff done on your own and work in isolation, and that's kind of productive. But you're also realizing what you do miss from interaction with people and what kind of meetings do and don't work. There's been lots of meetings where it's actually been far quicker having it on the phone for me. But then there's also been ones which, where you're looking at drawings or you need a bit of collaboration with everyone contributing at once, which you can't do. So you might structure meetings to be more impactful, and when you want them, where you want them, and actually go into the office when you can add something. You're not just in the office because you're being told to. So all of these different impacts, I don't know what the net impact will be, because on one hand, you might see more like one person for every 15 meters squared in the office. So you actually have just the same amount of office space, but less people in it.
Mm-hmm.
A total net amount of office space, but some is in central London or central city, and some might be more satellite offices in local high streets. So it could be really interesting. And equally, some people might not live in suburbia because they hate the commute, or they might put up with the commute for 2 days a week because they only need to be in the office 2 days a week. Or you might see people move into more urbanized areas because they love the interaction with people and realize that they don't need a huge 4-bed detached house, and what they actually like is being close to amenities and close to people and close to culture. So yeah, all of this might net off and be nothing changes.
Right. Well, let's think about one example that it seems like it's working quite well and generally can possibly adapt to the results of the pandemic in a fairly decent way and a fairly quick way as well. I'm of course speaking about King's Cross that you worked with for a while. Do you think there's certain principles that we can learn from it, from the perspective of its design, the way it's put together, and the way how people can use it now?
Yeah, well, so those that don't know, I work at a development called King's Cross in central London that's been developed over the last 10 years and master planned by Argent. So we, to an extent, started with a clean slate. So we didn't have there's plenty of constraints, but on the actual footprint, we could start with a new public realm, really, and a new urban framework. And as I was saying earlier, that's kind of what we started with, was thinking about the spaces in between the buildings rather than the buildings. And now that's kind of paying dividends by 40% of the area's public realm. So when people with people really wanting to use that as a place to go visit friends and family in this social distance environment, and we haven't had to make too many radical changes to pavement widths because there aren't many cars, if any cars around anyway. So it's shown a real value of public realm, and I think it's something that obviously wasn't designed for this kind of pandemic, but it's back to principles of good design, of making spaces that are for people, where it is wide open public realm. There's plenty of greenery. We're next to the canal, so people can be in touch with nature as well. And then the office spaces, I think we have less control over how they can change because we're not responsible for the fit out, or how our occupiers have chosen to make the space their own. But what we can do is help them on their way back into work, and particularly trying to avoid public transport. One of the benefits of King's Cross is that it is very well connected to public transport, but it's not necessarily the strength of the moment. The strength is probably more our ability to get people to walk and cycle to work, and we have a right cycling infrastructure to support people getting into work that way. And we have, I know, something like 5,000 cycle spaces across the estate, and all best-in-class shower facilities, which I think have been appreciated more than ever right now.
Amazing. And it kind of brings me back as well to our very beginning of this conversation, and the principles of the good designs that you were talking about overall, but also about the fact that this neighborhood is quite self-sufficient because of the variety of uses inside and there. Do you want to just give a bit more about everything that is situated around there and what is actually making it the complete self-sufficient neighborhood, if it does?
Yeah, so yeah, it's a good point. So it is mixed use as well, where probably about half of it is office space. We've got another 10-20% of like retail and amenity, and then another 30% of residential. So it was very deliberately meant to be mixed use from the beginning. Again, not to make it resilient to the pandemic, but it does make it resilient now, where because we've got income streams from other sources, we don't need to rely on retail wholly. So we've been able to give 3 months rent free to our retailers, recognize it's a difficult patch for them. And I think, yeah, if you live at King's Cross or in a surrounding area, you'll love that you can just go visit the shops and you don't need to rely on public transport to get there. You have your amenities on your doorstep. And yeah, it goes back to what makes a great city is having that mixed use. And it hasn't, you've seen some dead zones in London recently where it's just been because the whole place has been designed around offices, no one's been using it, whereas King's Cross has still been used throughout this time because there's other uses there and people enjoy visiting it to go for a run or a walk and to get a bit of fresh air in Zone 1 London, which doesn't have, well, actually it does have quite a lot of open space, I suppose, but more at King's Cross as well.
Right. Well, amazing. I think I'm going to be wrapping up this session. Thank you very much for joining us today on this. Thank you for MIPIM to actually inviting us to have this interesting conversation. For those who joined this live very late, we discussed a lot of different topics, so do check back what we were speaking about. We discussed green infrastructure, 15-minute city. We discussed a variety of different typologies and neighborhoods, and basically what will make them a self-sufficient neighborhood. We also spoke about different ways of occupying your office spaces and points of the good design that are known for the last 60 years from Jane Jacobs' time up to very now, but have been neglected for a variety of commercial reasons. Thank you very much for joining us today, and have a great day.